I'd like to introduce Molly Binetti. She's a sports performance coach at the University of Louisville, where her sport responsibilities include women's basketball, softball, volleyball, and women's tennis. She started her career as an intern at Marquette University, and has since then has made stops at Exos, the University of Minnesota, Creighton-Durham Hall High School, and Purdue University. She received her Master's of Education in Kinesiology from the University of Minnesota and bachelor's degree in exercise physiology from Marquette University. She is a co-author of an article titled Mechanical Determinants of Faster Change of Direction and Agility in Female Basketball Athletes, published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research in 2015. She is certified through the CSCCA and the NSCA, and she has also obtained the certification from the FMS Level 1. Molly Binetti.
Thank you, Rob, and really, first and foremost, thank you to the CSCCA, Chuck Stiggins, for allowing me the opportunity to be up here. I'm really excited to be up here and for this opportunity to speak with you all this morning, and thank you guys for getting out of bed and getting here at 8 a.m. I know these are always hit or miss first session of the day. A couple thank yous that I do need to get out of the way before, because I wouldn't be up here without the help of a lot of people along the way. Starting back to Todd Smith at Marquette University, getting me sparking an interest in this field, allowing me my first opportunity to intern there throughout my undergrad experience. From there, moving on to Exos, University of Minnesota, Sarah Wiley has played a huge role in my development. And Purdue University, Coach Dwayne Carlisle for giving me my first opportunity as a full-time coach at the young age of 23 and allowing me to grow and develop under him. And right now, Tina Murray and my Louisville family, I've got Heather Engel and Jason Durkin here with me today to support me, but thank you to them for allowing me to grow and push me to develop every single day. But again, thank you guys. I'm excited to be here. I'm ready to go. I hope you are too. Building athletes, preparing champions. That is our mission, our motto of Louisville Sports Performance. That's what we live and breathe every single day. But what does that look like? What does that mean? And how do we do that? It's 8 a.m. I know it's early. I want to get you guys awake. I want to take the next 2 minutes to give you a glimpse inside who we are and what we live and breathe every single day.
Why is the alarm going off? It's only 5:15. Then it hits you. It's time. Time to rise, time to work, time to focus. Time to take one step closer to the ultimate goal. We're not interested in easy. Easy gets us nowhere. We get out of bed, prepared to attack the day. Prepared for the daily grind to bigger, faster, stronger, fitter, and tougher. We believe it all starts here. 1, 2, 3, 4! It's a mindset, it's a lifestyle, it's an approach. Building athletes, preparing champions. That's what it's all about. That's what it means to be a Cardinal.
Come on, keep driving the knee. 3, 2, 1!
We commit to rising above negative thoughts, weakness, and shortcuts. We commit to ourselves, we commit to our teammates, we commit to the name on the front, not the name on the back. What does it mean to be a Cardinal? It means walking like a champion, talking like a champion, and training like a champion. Training harder, training smarter, embracing and trusting the process. It means taking care of our teammates and accomplishing the mission. We honor the tradition. Humble and hungry, leaving it all on the line. Attacking, finishing, winning, because that's what we do. Getting out of bed, that's the easy part, and we wouldn't want it any other way.
It's important to note that while I'm going to be talking specifically about our women's basketball team today, how we operate as a staff and how we operate as a department is systemic. Our commitment to our philosophy, our commitment to our mission and our motto is department-wide. And everything that we do revolves around 3 target outcomes. our commitment to our 3 target outcomes. First, and most importantly, minimizing the risk of injury. Teams that win have the most amount of talent healthy and available on game day. Period. The end. We need to keep our athletes on the court, first and foremost. Second, maximizing their readiness and development, not just over the course of 1 year, but over the course of their entire career. And third, optimize team success, winning. We are on a mission to win national championships. My presentation today is going to focus specifically on 4 R's behind how we build athletes and prepare champions. Everything that we do, those 3 target outcomes, you're going to see as a recurring theme in each of these 4 areas. And it's my goal that you leave today with a different understanding, a different approach when it comes to recruiting, minimizing risk, maximizing readiness, and return to performance. That is my goal. I want you to be able to take something from our approach and apply that to your situation. And it starts with getting the right athletes in the door. Recruiting matters, but why does it matter? Everybody recruits. But why does an athlete want to come to the University of Louisville to play basketball versus another school? What are the separating factors? When an athlete first walks in the door, they walk into our culture. The first thing that they see is our wall, building athletes, preparing champions. That is the very first thing that they see. What we do, how we do it, why we do it, that's our culture. And that's what makes us unique. Building athletes is the easy part. Training a basketball player is not rocket science. Training athletes is not rocket science, and that's not undermining what we do, but that's the easy part. How we train all starts with our mindset. This is our cardinal code. So this is how we approach training in our weight room, but this is also the message that we're sending to our athletes, how to approach their everyday life in every aspect of their life. And it starts with getting your mind right. When you first walk into our weight room, above our doors says, get your mind right. What that means is whatever is going on outside your life, whatever stuff you have going on, whether it's with school, relationships, even on the basketball court, leave that at the door, and as soon as you walk in that door, all of that goes away. You're ready to go. Get your mind right. Second is attack. Attack every rep, attack every set, attack everything that you do with the mindset that you're going to dominate it. That means if we see a rep that is poor, we're going to start that rep over. If we see a set that's done poorly, if the way that you're working in our weight room, the way that you're maneuvering about, moving about, is not up to our standard, we're going to do it over. And again, it's not just about what we do in a weight room, but how are you attacking everything in your everyday life? And third is finish strong. Specifically for us, that means finishing our workouts with some sort of competitive finisher, not just to finish that workout and prepare you for the next one, but to finish that workout and prepare you for the rest of the day. Our cardinal code is what we live, it's what we breathe, and it's what the mindset that we try to instill in our athletes every single time that they walk in the door. So we explain that to them first, our mindset when it comes to training. But preparing champions is where the separation lies, and that's where the challenge lies. We let them know that what we mean by preparing champions is we are committed to developing the holistic perspective of a champion. We are committed to developing the entire anatomy of a champion, physically training the body, strengthening the mind, and fostering the competitive spirit. Performance is not about what we do. Performance is not about sets and reps, how much somebody can front squat or how fast they can move the bar. It's not about what exercises that we choose. And performance is not a picture of 12 girls flexing in front of a mirror. Performance is deeply rooted in the complexity of the body, mind, and spirit. It is taking an athlete where they physically, mentally, spiritually have never been before and creating an environment where they're able to explore those boundaries, where they're able to push and expand those boundaries. That is our responsibility. And that is our commitment to them, is we're going to build you as an athlete, but we are also going to build you as an entire person. We are going to take a holistic approach to performance. And in order to do that, we need a high-performance model. Our high-performance model is an athlete-centered model. The athlete is the center of this wheel. They are the hub of the wheel. And all these different spokes that you see Coming out from the center here, and I know this is hard to read, hopefully you can see it a little bit better in your packets. All these different areas represent a different aspect or area within training that we are trying to provide at the highest level of service possible. But this in itself doesn't make us unique. Everybody trains. Everybody is focusing on all these variations of training. It's not enough for us to just take these entities, create a program that we give to our athletes every couple of weeks, and leave it at that. Are we educating our athletes on each of these areas of training? Are we educating them on the training process? Are we educating them on the recovery process? And not only that, are we educating them about what a championship lifestyle means? Are we educating them on what that looks like? How to walk like a champion, how to talk like a champion, how to eat, sleep, train, recover like a champion? Are we showing them that? Are we instilling that in them every single day? Because it's not enough to just develop them as an athlete. If an athlete leaves our weight room and they're not also a better person because of us, if they don't have a different mindset because of us, we're not doing our jobs to our full capacity. So when we talk about performance and we talk about all the services that we offer them, it's not just about what we do, but it's about how we do it. It starts with our holistic approach, our high performance model, but it's not just us. It takes an entire village. We take a team approach to performance. So it's not just sports performance. We have sports medicine. We have performance nutrition, performance psychology. We have Coach Walls and his staff. We have academics. And we're not all on our own islands. The challenge lies in taking each of our domains, pulling each other closer to work seamlessly in integrating each of our areas and educating our athletes in each of these areas. Working together to provide the highest level of service possible. We are one team, we have one goal, and we have one mission. The athlete is in the center. They have every single resource available to them that they could want. And it's not just that, they have an entire team behind them. When they come on their recruiting visit, they see that. We're all speaking the same language. It's consistent, it's clear. It's in collaboration. They understand that if they're coming to the University of Louisville to play basketball, they're not just going to develop as an athlete, they're not just going to develop as a basketball player. They understand that we are committed to developing them as an entire person. And they have an entire team of the best professionals in their corner to support them. So the first step is getting the right athletes in the door. Going back to our first target outcome, minimizing the risk of injury. Teams that win have the most amount of talent, healthy, and available on game day. I'm going to make a Kentucky Derby reference right now because the race is on Saturday, but if you don't have your horses, it's hard to race. So what are we doing to keep our athletes on the court? And it drives me crazy when I hear coaches chalk up injuries to, it's just the nature of the game, it's the nature of the beast. Or it's because they're overtrained or they're fatigued. It's on us, people. We have a hand. We have a huge hand in preventing the amount of non-contact injuries that our athletes suffer. But if we are committed to minimizing injury risk, we need to first understand injury, especially when it comes to females and basketball. What do we know? We know these are the top 5 predictors of non-contact injury. There's a lot of research out there. We know females are at a higher risk of suffering non-contact injury versus males. If we're looking at basketball specifically within college, NCAA women's basketball players are 3 times more likely to suffer an ACL injury versus men's basketball players. So again, looking at these top 5 predictors, first and foremost, previous injury, specifically a significant injury within the past 12 months. If you have suffered an injury, let's say an ACL, the risk of you re-injuring that limb or tearing your other ACL is very high. So we have to understand where an athlete's been before they walk in our doors and understand, especially within the past year, what has gone on. Second, poor movement quality and asymmetry within movement. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail coming up. Third, lack of neuromuscular control. Fourth, body composition outside of ideal ranges. Looking at low lean mass levels versus high fat mass levels, understanding the nature of the game, the high impact nature of the game, and the stress that places on the body. Higher body composition, higher fat mass puts you at an increased risk. And lastly, a low fitness level, low work capacity. So to truly get an idea of risk and how to screen it and how to understand it, if you tell me you're committed to minimizing risk and you're not looking at each of these 5 factors, I'm going to tell you that you're full of it. We need to have a complete understanding. We build our screening and our assessment around those 5 predictors, and this is how we do it. I know this is a lot of words and a little bit hard to read, so I'll go through it slowly. But previous injury, as we know, requires a detailed medical history from our sports medicine staff. We need to know where they've been up until they've walked through our doors. Within movement quality and asymmetry, as a department, we'll use the functional movement screen because we need to be able to quantitatively, qualitatively give a baseline number to movement quality. Using this department-wide allows for collaboration between sports performance and sports medicine, consistent communication, a consistent approach to assessing movement quality, and also a consistent approach to correcting movement. It allows for that collaboration and that, again, that same message and that same approach to correcting and teaching movement. So within the FMS, we're not as concerned about the total score. For us, our minimum standard is a total score of 15, but again, that's not the main point. Do they have pain with any movement? Is there any significant asymmetry within the patterns that we see? But we know if they have a total score of 15 or greater, there aren't any glaring mobility, stability deficiencies. There aren't any glaring gross movement pattern deficiencies, excuse me. And so that's what we look at. Is there pain? Is there asymmetry? Also within that category, closed chain ankle dorsiflexion, we will measure that because we know, especially in basketball players, a lot of the injuries that we see stem from the foot and lack of mobility in the ankle. So with that, we're looking at, we would like, ideally, a greater than 30-degree range of motion, right to left, and no significant asymmetries on either side. And if we do see that, that will require additional follow-up with sports medicine for extra needs there. Neuromuscular control, our athletic trainer will do the wide balance lower quarter screen on all of our athletes. And now understand, this is a time-consuming screen, but it gives us a lot of very important information. And when we look at that, specifically we're looking at the total composite score on both limbs, and based on a lot of research by Phil Plisky, our cutoff is a 93% composite score on each leg. We know that anything below that is going to increase the risk of injury. Looking at the anterior reach, research shows greater than a 4-centimeter difference, your risk of injury goes up. A lot of the research studies, you'll see somewhere between 2.5 and 3.8 times more likely to suffer a non-contact injury with a greater than 4-centimeter difference. When it comes to body composition, we'll perform a 7-site skin fold. Understanding based on the body of literature out there and based on 20 years of historical data within women's basketball, 10 years of that coming from Louisville women's basketball, the other 10 collegiate women's basketball, ideal ranges for a guard, 13 to 16%. Ideal ranges for a post, 13 to 18%. Understanding that if an athlete is within a couple percentages, it's not the end of the world, and that doesn't immediately put them at high risk. But again, due to the nature of the game, the high impact nature of the game, when we see a high body fat percentage, and we see a low lean mass versus a high fat mass, it's going to place an increased stress, increased demand on the body. And last but not least, fitness level. We will do the standard beep test as a measure of aerobic capacity. And our minimum standard is a level 9. That tells us, is an athlete fit enough to practice right here, right now? That's not our performance standard, but that's our minimum standard. So we're able to take each of these 5 predictors, we're able to screen and gather as much information as possible so then we can put it into our risk profile. Now we can see a snapshot view of each athlete on the left, and if they meet our minimum standards or not. Are they there or are they below? This is an easy way for us to stratify risk. We can then color code it, red, yellow, green. Red being high risk, if you have 3 or more of these risk factors. Moderate risk, 2 or more. Low risk, 1 or fewer. This allows us to share this with our athletic trainer. We're able to share this with our coaching staff. We're able to share this with nutrition. Everybody's on the same page. We each understand where each athlete is, and then we can formulate a plan. We understand that just one of these factors in itself doesn't necessarily present a high risk. It's a multifactorial approach. These all interplay. We understand if we have somebody who's an inefficient mover and they have a poor work capacity, they're going to fatigue a lot faster, and when you have fatigue, it alters your motor control. It creates compensation, which in turn equals more fatigue. More fatigue leads to injury, and the cycle continues. You see injury, and again, your motor control is altered, you have compensation. So we're able to get a clear picture where our athletes are, and then formulate a clear risk management plan. That is our goal. Create as much information as possible, so then we can then individualize what we're doing for each athlete in terms of managing the risk. But that's not enough. That's step 1, but that's not enough, because we also want to see where our athletes are from a performance standpoint when they walk in the door. We saw risk, but we're also going to test and evaluate key performance indicators, metrics that matter, metrics that we know are important for a basketball player. So we're going to look at strength levels, upper body and lower body. We're going to look at lower body power in conjunction with our body composition and our movement quality measures. And when we look at these measures and these minimum standards as they pertain to risk, again, this is from a wide body of literature. You're going to find a lot of different studies that look at what are minimum strength standards, especially for female athletes. What we have, we'll test upper body strength. We'll test the bench press. Our minimum standard being, are they at 80% of their body weight? 80% minimum standard. Lower body strength, trap bar deadlift. Are they at a minimum standard of 150% of their body weight? And again, when we look at fitness level, when we look at performance standards for our beep test, and based on 10 years of our Louisville women's basketball data, our standard for our guards is level 12-1, and our standard for our posts is level 11-1. And you can see correlating VO2 max numbers with that as well. Those are our performance standards. And again, when an athlete walks in the door, we see where they are from a baseline standpoint, and our first goal is to get them to our minimum standard. Then we have time to develop them to get to our performance standard. And you think, Louisville women's basketball, we're fortunate enough, we get a lot of really good basketball players. But being a really good basketball player doesn't always correlate to being a really good athlete. And I'll take this year for example. We had the #1 recruiting class in the country, freshman class coming in, and we have one girl who has a hard time breathing and blinking at the same time. You watch her running up and down the court and she looks like Bambi, a baby giraffe. We have another girl who comes in and runs a level 4 on the beep test. My dog could run higher than a level 4 on the beep test. So understanding that we have great basketball players, it doesn't always mean that they're great athletes. So it's important that we gather all of this information so we can individualize our programs and individualize our approach to risk and performance. Again, we can take those metrics that we test and put them into our performance profile. Again, a snapshot view. Are they at our minimum standard or are they below it? You'll also notice on this, we will assess lower body power, and we'll look at several different jumps to do so. Okay, we'll look at a static jump, and we'll compare that to their counter movement jump, because we want to see what is their eccentric utilization ratio. How efficient are they at utilizing their stress shortening cycle? So we'll compare the two there. We'll assess horizontal power by doing a long jump, and then we'll assess elasticity, reactive strength by doing a depth jump. So we have baseline numbers on their lower body power. Again, take all of this information, we are now able to create a performance management plan. What do we do with that information? Again, that's just the starting point. Collecting this information is critical, but it's useless unless we do something meaningful with it. And that's where the challenge lies, is now what do we do? Well, if we are being thorough in the way that we screen for risk, if we're being thorough in the way we evaluate key performance indicators, we now have a plan. Nick Winkleman is a heck of a coach, somebody I got to learn under when I was at Exos a few years ago, and he hit the nail on the head when he said, great coaching is a lot like GPS. You have to have an end in mind, an optimal route to get there, and the ability to take a detour and reroute as needed. We are an assessment-based, performance-driven program. That is our GPS. We know where we want to go, but unless we have this information, we don't know how to get there. Which brings us to now the fun part, readiness. Now we get to train. How do you define readiness? Readiness is a state of being fully prepared. That's a very vague definition. But readiness is closing the gap between where we are and where we want to be. And when it comes to determining readiness, sorry this is hard to see, we can really determine it through three ways. Screening and testing, which we just covered, that's step one. Training, which we're about to cover, those two areas fall under the umbrella of long-term readiness. And then tracking and monitoring, which will fall under short-term readiness. When it comes to training, excuse me, I know it's hard to see, it's a bullseye on the left there. If we don't have the information that we gather from our screening and from our testing and assessing, we're just blindly throwing darts, hoping that what we do is going to stick. We're just blindly throwing darts, hoping that what we're prescribing in our training is actually specific to what that athlete needs. And that's where we used to be. On the right represents where we are now, and that's our goal. We want to have as much information as possible so that we can adequately prescribe the right training and the right risk management methods so we can try to get as close to that bullseye as we possibly can. When it comes to long-term readiness, we believe in our long-term athlete development model. We're not just concerned about preparing our athletes for 1 year. We're looking at their development over the course of 4 years. And so once we screen and we test, we slide our athletes right into our block zero, our functional foundation, where we are really concerned about teaching movement. We want to create efficient movers, first and foremost. So we'll spend as much time as we need to grooving our big five motor patterns, our squat, our hinge, lunge, step, push-up, teaching primitive patterns, teaching movement and stability from the ground up, breathing, rolling, crawling. Again, our foundation is first and foremost. We need to build a huge and strong foundation because movement comes at the core of everything that we do. Sport is movement. We want to create efficient movers first. Before then, moving to block one, where we're now adding volume and trying to create as big of an engine as we can. And as you go up and down this scale, I want you to understand that this development model is very individualized. This looks different for every athlete that we have. The amount of time that they spend in their foundation phase, capacity, developmental peak, that is going to vary based on where they are developmentally. Are they a freshman or are they a senior? What their needs are, what their risk is. We might have a freshman come in, and they might never truly get to that peak phase because we need to spend time reteaching movement. We need to get a lot of volume on them, and we need to get them so they're meeting our minimum standards of strength before we try to do anything that's more sport specific. Whereas we have an athlete that may be a junior or a senior and has been in our program for 3 or 4 years now, we're always going to revisit movement quality. We're always going to revisit work capacity. But they're going to be spending more time in our developmental, in our peak phases, because that's what their needs require. We might have athletes that are very strong, but now we need to work on making them as explosive as possible. Okay, so this is a sliding scale. It's a dynamic continuum. We're sliding up and down the scale throughout the course of 1 year, but also we're looking at long term. We're looking at over the course of 4 years. Again, always revisiting movement quality every single day. We're always going to revisit aerobic capacity, work capacity, but how much time an athlete spends in here is very, very different. And I'll give you an example. This year, we had a sophomore. As a freshman, she came in stronger than an ox. Had never really trained before, but one of those athletes that's just a specimen. And so she came in, and it's one of those athletes that you get in, you're super excited to work with them because you know that they're a freak and you know you can do some pretty cool things. Freshman year, had a great year for us. Honorable mention, All-American. But she always struggled with fitness, always. She was able to be as explosive as can be, but run her up and down the court 4 or 5 times and we'd have to take her out for a few minutes. So coach was always honest about fitness level. Well, this year she came in, we trained all summer, we were able to lift with her all summer, and where preseason comes around, first few games come around, and fitness level is still not where coach wants it to be. So he said, no lifting. She didn't touch a weight from the end of preseason until March. And as a strength coach, you're like, okay. It's not, we could probably get the same adaptation that you want and still lift at the same time, but at the end of the day, it's coach's program, right? So she didn't touch a weight for us. We know that her strength levels are dropping. We saw her power drop. Her vertical jump dropped almost 5 inches. I know, you're shaking your head, you're pulling your hair out, you're like, oh my God, this is not good. Well, she was in the top 3 in scoring, top 3 in rebounding, and was voted ACC Player of the Year. So it's not undermining what we do. What we do is important, but it's not important unless they're being a better basketball player on the court. What we do does not matter unless they're playing basketball at a really high level, and that's what she needed, was a really, really big aerobic capacity, a really big work capacity. We needed to go back and hit conditioning harder than we ever have. While the team was lifting, she was on the treadmill or she was doing something else. She was able to play at a much higher level. She felt the best that she's ever felt. And again, had a heck of a season because of it. So it's not undermining what we do, but understanding that sometimes we need to put our egos aside and understand that we need to do what is best for them on the basketball court. It's not about driving our numbers up, but how much they can lift or how high they can jump. It's about making them a better basketball player. Now, as we approach preseason and as we approach in-season, okay, sustaining a high level of performance requires a lot of things. Okay, it requires a daily approach to consistent tracking and monitoring, looking at a whole variety of different metrics, which we'll get into. It requires daily communication between coaching staff, us, sports medicine, nutrition, again, performance psychology. And it requires collecting information on metrics that matter. So we can make the most informed decisions about an athlete's readiness, about their fatigue, about their recovery, about what they need that specific day. And again, it takes a village. I'm going to talk to you a lot about different objective measures that we use, subjective measures, and how they all play together, understanding that it's not necessarily about what we do, but it's the why behind we do it and what we're looking at specifically. And we're going to start with, oh, this didn't turn out very good, a little dark. Okay, we're going to start with simple things. Every single day, we're tracking body weight. So they'll weigh in before practice. They will weigh out after practice. Not just looking at it from a hydration status standpoint, but we're looking at any acute changes in body weight, so we're able to then dig a little bit deeper. The graph on the left represents, it's looking at one of our players and tracking her body weight over the course of a season in comparison to her average. But we know that body weight is not the complete picture. The graph on the right, we will track body composition every about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the athlete. If it's an athlete that we know we need to keep a really close eye on, we're going to do it more often. But we'll look at body composition because we know we want to be maintaining lean mass. We don't want our fat mass to be increasing. We don't want our percentage to be increasing. So we're looking not just at body weight, but at body composition as well. We're able to fill out a daily wellness questionnaire. We use Conduct as our athlete management platform. We're able to do a daily wellness questionnaire. Our athletes can log into their phone, they can log into their iPad. It's really 5 simple questions. What's your fatigue level? Scale of 1 to 5. Sleep quality, muscle soreness, stress levels, mood state, all on a 1 to 5 sliding scale. And then we look at hours of sleep. Now, first and foremost, this is an education process, right? We need to get our athletes bought into why we're doing this in order to get good data. So they're not just, it automatically defaults to 3, so we're not just getting entries every day that's just 3, 8 hours of sleep. That doesn't tell us anything. So it's an education process, understanding why this information is critical. So we can see a subjective measure of how they're feeling that day. How are they responding to the training and the practices that they're undergoing? Again, we can take all of this information within Conduct in conjunction with the metrics that we're getting from body weight, body composition, and technology that I'm going to get into very shortly. We can look at all of those metrics and all of that information interplaying with each other, because we know it's not just one thing that's going to put an athlete at risk. It's a multifactorial approach. We need to be looking at the entire picture. Okay, so it's important that we do those three things, and we'll also track a counter movement jump to look at lower body power and manage that throughout the course of the season. And that's something that we'll do weekly, especially after our off day. Okay, so we'll have games typically we play on Thursdays and Sundays. Monday's typically an off day. As we get further in the season, that changes. But we will power track. We will do a vertical jump on a just jump mat. We're very fancy. Okay, but we're able to look at jump height as well as relative power. Okay, so that's where it becomes really important to get body weight and to understand body composition, so that when we look at these power numbers, we can get a better understanding of what that actually means. Because we know if an athlete starts to drop in lean mass and their fat mass starts to get a little bit higher, their body composition goes up, and we see that in our power tracking as well, that forces us to ask a little bit more question about what's really going on. Then we can look at their daily wellness survey too. Well, what's their fatigue level? How many hours have they been sleeping in the past few days? What's their soreness like? Okay, so this is something simple that you can do on a weekly basis. Again, it's just one of the factors, but you can see a little bit better screenshot or a snapshot of where this athlete is. I'm going to get a little bit into technology here. Now, this is not the bulk of my presentation, but how many people in here use Polar heart rate system? Raise your hands high. Okay, a few people. What about Catapult? A few, perfect. Well, I'm happy to talk to you guys afterwards in more detail. I'm going to touch briefly on how we utilize this technology and what we're looking for specifically and how that plays with everything. But if you guys have more specific questions, I'm happy to talk to you guys in a little bit more detail afterwards. We've been fortunate enough to use Polar now for several years to get a really good understanding of what are the metabolic and internal loads and stresses being placed on the body. Okay, it not only gives us an indication of somebody's fitness level over time or on a day-to-day basis, but it gives us a better understanding too of their recovery. Okay, their recovery curves, how much time that they need or how much time is estimated off of what stress is being placed on them. But really what we're looking at, we want to look at their training load, which is really a measure of volume plus intensity. So we're not just looking at duration of practice. Okay, that's technically volume, but we want to look at the volume and intensity, which gives us our training load. When we look at intensity specifically, we understand that in a basketball game, on average, our guards will spend a minimum of 20 minutes above 90% of their heart rate max. We know that posts are going to spend a minimum of 12 minutes above 90% heart rate max. So when we look at intensity, we look at a given practice, we look at a conditioning session, we're looking at how much time, how many minutes did they get over 90%. We're able to use Polar as one way that we help our coaches plan practice. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail too, but if we have a practice plan where we're supposed to be hitting game-like intensities, and we see at the end of our practice, we have players underneath these thresholds, we will then do supplemental conditioning at the end of practice because we know we want to get quality minutes above threshold. An important thing to understand as well, if you have an athlete that's unfit, the amount of time that they spend in this zone is going to be much greater than an athlete that is very fit. So it's important to really distinguish and individualize what you're looking at and have a complete understanding of where that athlete is. Are they spending that much time there because they're unfit? Or are they spending that much time there because they're actually getting quality game-like intensity minutes? Okay, that's one piece of the puzzle. Okay, in conjunction with Polar, this is year 2 now using Catapult for us. So we are still learning. But we were able to take what we learned in year 1 to make much more informed decisions in year 2. Important things that we look at. We're able to really quantify now mechanical stress, external stress placed on the body. So now we have more of a complete picture, right? We have metabolic and we have mechanical. When we look at volume, we look at player load as a metric. That gives us an idea of the volume of practice, or of a game, or of conditioning. When we look at intensity, we look at player load per minute. So we look at player load per duration to give us an intensity metric, to give us a percent. When we look at efficiency, we'll look at IMA per player load. How is our athlete moving on the court? How efficiently are they moving on the court? And then with basketball, we of course want to look at jumps. And really look at this from an individual level too. Not just total number of jumps that they're undergoing in a practice, but the intensity of those jumps as well. Understanding what each athlete looks like, what kind of qualities or characteristics they have, where if you have an athlete that you know is very explosive, very strong, they rack up a lot of intensity, they rack up a lot of jumps in practice, they can jump high to begin with, so the amount of jumps that they're having plus the heights that they're jumping is going to place a much greater stress on the body for somebody who can't jump very high to begin with. This gives us a really complete picture over time when we use this every day of what does each individual athlete look like? What is their movement signature? If we don't collect this every day, if we don't collect this over a period of time, we don't know that and we can't make decisions off of it. And again, we have an entire year for our players, that came back this year. We had an entire year of data on them. So we're able to know from year 1 what each athlete looked like, which then allowed us to create more of a structure, more of a plan for those athletes coming in. Now we had a whole group of freshmen coming in that we had no information on. So this year was really about collecting as much information on them as possible, so now going forward, we're able to make better decisions regarding them. But again, the technology is a huge advantage. It's not the end-all, be-all, but it really, truly gives us an understanding of all of the stressors that are being placed on the body at any given time. Okay? Going back, the 3 R's that we've covered so far. We've started from 0, we've screened for injury risk, and we've collected that information. We've created our risk management plan. We then tested key performance indicators, metrics that matter. We have an understanding of where they are and what their baseline levels are from a performance standpoint. And then we're tracking and monitoring all these measures in season, again, to get a complete picture of where this athlete's readiness is on any given day. So we have all of those 3 areas covered. We understand where their baseline is, what they look like normally, which lays the groundwork for our next R, which is return to performance. And that's something that as a profession, we do not do very well. We do not do this well. We need to do it better. And it's understanding where they've been so that if an injury does happen, which we know sport is chaotic, injuries are going to happen, we can play a big hand in preventing them, but it's going to happen. So what happens when someone gets injured? What happens when someone's out for an extended period of time with an illness? Well, if we haven't gone back and checked off all those marks on our checklist and we don't have that information, how in the heck do we know where to go from there? We don't. It takes a village of people. It takes our entire high-performance team to collaborate and work together to properly return an athlete to performance. It's not just about what we do. It's not just about what sports medicine does. We understand, too, that at any given time during the rehabilitation and reconditioning process, the amount of time an athlete spends with each of us is going to differ. We understand in the early stages, in the beginning stages, they're going to be spending a lot of time with sports medicine, a lot of time. We're going to be doing what we can from a training standpoint, training the body in ways that are acceptable and make sense for that athlete based on the injury. That athlete's still going to be meeting with nutrition to make sure that they're fueling the body properly to heal and make sure that we're maintaining body composition as much as possible. They're going to be meeting with performance psychology to one, figure out how to cope with an injury, especially if it's an athlete that's never dealt with an injury or some sort of setback or adversity before. They're going to be working with them throughout that entire injury process to make sure that we're ready to go. And then as we progress, once an athlete's medically cleared, they're returning to baseline from a medical standpoint, we're going to be getting more time with them. So how are we bridging that gap from when an athlete meets their return to play baselines? How do we bridge that gap to return to performance? Getting them back on the court, moving well, moving at a high level, okay? It first goes back to our minimum standards. We've got to go back. We've got to take a step backward. Are they meeting our minimum standards? Is their movement quality back to normal? If it's not, that's an issue. So are they at their baseline functional movement screen score? Are they presenting with any significant asymmetries right to left? Neuromuscular control. What does their Y balance look like now? What did it look like before? What is their body composition like? We understand that body composition and fitness level, it's going to take a little bit of time to get back. That's not our first concern. But what is their movement quality like? What does their neuromuscular control look like? If there are asymmetries, that's a problem. And then as we progress even further into the rehab process, reconditioning process, are they back to their minimum strength standards? Are they back to where they were prior to injury? If they are not, do not pass go, do not collect $200, you need to go back to jail. You need to start back and readdress movement quality. You need to go back and make sure that their neuromuscular control in a controlled setting is back to baseline. You need to make sure that there are no significant asymmetries right to left. That's step one. And then as they progress and they spend more time with us, there are a lot of really simple things that we can do to really get a better idea of how this athlete is now moving. Okay, so first and foremost, use your eyes. Watch them move. Whether it's on a treadmill or on the court, are they favoring one limb versus the other? Can you see any clear compensations? That's step one, but even, still a simple thing, but more advanced than that. Grab your phone, grab an iPad, take video of them on a treadmill, take video of them on the court, cutting, changing direction, accelerating, decelerating. What do you see? Can you see on video that they're favoring one side versus the other? Take videos of them jumping. Take videos of them hopping, front and back, side to side, multi-direction. What do they look like? We had a freshman come in this year who had surgery in the summer for athletic pubalgia. So she was coming in and really was returning to performance right around preseason. So with her, we didn't have any baseline information on her. We didn't have any technology on her. We didn't have any numbers. But we were fortunate enough, we have a reconditioning coordinator. We have a great sports medicine staff. In the collaboration with all of us, we were able to do a progression and create a progression that was really smart. Okay, so we were able to put catapult on her as we started to return her back to the court, return her back to running. We were able to take video of her. Our reconditioning coordinator was able to take video of her hopping left and right. We were able to take video of her running on a treadmill, running on the court. We were able to take that video and we were able to send it to Catapult. And they were able to do a stride analysis for us, which showed when we first sent off video, we were able to show that there was a 13% asymmetry right and left side. Which if you look at a lot of the research out there, ideally you want to be within a 5% difference. So we had to go back to work. Back to work in the training room, back to work with us. We were able to, a couple weeks later, send video back. She was down to an 11%. So we're on the right track. As time went on, again, we were able to send it back. We got her down to a 7% difference. And again, that's an advantage of having that technology and to be able to really identify what's going on left and right. But it doesn't take that to make smarter decisions. Use your eyes and use video. So once an athlete gets back on the court and gets moving, what happens now when we return them to practice? Are we giving them an arbitrary 30-minute time limit for practice? 60-minute time limit for practice? What the hell does that even mean? What is going on in that 30 minutes? What's going on in that 60 minutes? What kind of drills is that composed of? What kind of intensities, volumes? We don't know. We don't know. So for us, when it comes to managing practice, when it comes to planning and periodizing practice, we're able to use metrics from Polar and from Catapult to create daily, weekly, monthly practice plans. Because we know, based on all the information that we've collected, we know what an average game load is from Catapult. We know what an average player load is. Again, like I talked about before, we know what averages are for spending time above 90% of our heart rate max. So we're able to organize our practice planning through a red, yellow, green system. Okay? 100% is our average training load, or excuse me, our average player load for a game. That's our 100%. So if we look at a red practice or a red day, that's between 75% and 100% of those game loads. If we look at yellow, between 50 and 74%. And if we look at green, 25 to 49%. So we have this plan in place. You know, as we progress this athlete back into practice, we had a plan for our team. Now again, we don't have numbers on her, so to make a more logical decision, we're able to take whatever load we had planned for that day for our team. Let's say we are supposed to have a red day, and we wanted to be at about 75 or 80% of our loads. We're able to cut that number in half and start there. Take 50% of whatever was planned, start there, and then see how that athlete responds. And then we're able to, again, have a starting point, so we're able to logically progress her back 5% at a time. So whatever we had planned, again, we took 50% of that. Now, it doesn't mean that you're always following a plan. This is not a protocol. This is not something that you follow to a T. This is something that gives us a guideline. It gives us a starting point. And we use that information in conjunction with everything else. You know, what are her daily wellness surveys looking like? We know we imposed this amount of load on her. How did she respond? How does she feel? Have a conversation. Ask them, how do you feel? Well, if her soreness is way up, she feels like crap, we know, okay, now we need to back off a little bit. We need to make an adjustment. But if we see, you know, we have a high load that day and she still feels good, we're able to say, okay, we're on the right path. And again, it's a day-by-day process. But it takes all of that information. And the point is that you have a plan in the first place. You have a systematic plan. It's not going to always be followed. It's not going to always be followed. But again, it gives us more information to make smarter decisions. We're getting away from just putting a time limit on their practice when we don't fully know. We're able to take the information that we've collected. We now know what certain drills look like. We're able to create a practice plan, share that with our coaches and work in collaboration and understand really what kind of loads and stresses we're imposing on that athlete. Taking it a step further, and this is something that I'm going to touch on briefly, acute chronic load is a newer metric that we've been able to look at just this year based on the research that's out there now by Tim Gabbett. Okay, and simply put, this is looking at the immediate stress that's being placed on the body on a certain day or within a period of 7 days, and comparing that to the stress or that the athlete's been exposed to over the past 2 to 6 weeks. So what are we doing to that athlete right now versus what they've been exposed to? So we understand if that ratio is lower, if what we're exposing them to is lower than what they've been exposed to, we understand they're prepared for that. They've handled those loads, so their body's prepared for that. Their fatigue is minimal. If we see that ratio creep up and get very high, we understand that the loads that we are now placing on the body are higher than what that athlete's been exposed to. And we want that because as we do that, our preparedness increases. But we have to understand, right? If we take a look at this graph, okay, this represents that same player that was coming back from injury. When you first reintroduce them to practice, that ratio is going to spike way up because their conditioning level is low. They haven't been exposed to much because they're just returning. So we understand we're going to see that spike in the beginning. But now how are we leveling that off? We can look at day by day, week by week, how that athlete is responding to the loads being placed on them. And you can see there were times when that ratio creeped up. If you look at the literature, it's going to tell you, if you see loads, if you see this ratio above 1.5, That's when you want to start to really pay more attention and be aware of what's going on. Sweet spot is between a 0.8 and 1.3, but that's a different conversation. Okay, but you can see that ratio creeped up a few times. But it's not enough to just look at this. We then have to go back, take that multifactorial approach. What are her wellness surveys looking like? What does her lower body power look like, both bilateral and unilateral? What are all the other metrics saying? What are they telling us? So we get a complete picture. But the point here is that now we can really look at what we are doing on any specific day or given week. We can see how that athlete is progressing. So we know that we're making sound progressions and not just, again, blindly throwing darts, hoping that we're prescribing the right amount. We can see. We know as an athlete gets back, we're going to continually progress because we need to continually prepare them to get their fitness levels back. But this is a process, and this is a starting point. This is something that's very new, so we're still learning a lot more about it. But again, it's something to keep in mind, especially if you do have this technology. It's a huge advantage, huge advantage. It all comes down to creating a systematic and methodical approach to performance and prevention. What are you doing to keep your athletes on the court? Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. I'll say it again. Teams that win have the most amount of talent healthy and available on game day. We need to minimize the risk of injury. Keep our athletes on the court. Maximize their readiness. Maximize their development over the course of their entire career. And at the end of the day, it comes down to winning. Preseason number 2. Preparation starts now. Thank you.